All right, so we had a little bit of break there, a little technical issue we had to take care of. So if you see a jump in the video, you'll kind of understand what happened. We're still new at this. We're still learning like you guys. So in some ways, we're just rookies trying to figure it out. So we're gonna jump a little bit away from the last discussion when we were talking about all what's wrong with college baseball, and spend the next few minutes talking about who we think has a chance to get to Omaha. It's the second week of the season, so. Yep. Your guess is as good as ours. If you have a favorite team, you probably want to insert your favorite team in there, unless you're.
Check this box right
Yeah, and unless you're, I don't know, anybody in the SEC probably's got a shot at this point, but some of them don't. Like if you're Missouri, you're probably not going to make it in. But
I beg to differ.
You think Missouri's going to make it?
I don't think they will, but I don't think you can rule them out right off the bat. And last year, 6 weeks into the season, Missouri was right there near the top.
Yeah.
And they closed out very, very, very poorly. I don't think there's any SEC team right now that you can sit there and say, wow, how did they do that? And I think...
Is it, wow, that's a good thing, or wow, that's a bad thing?
No, I'm just saying that I mean, obviously this isn't going to happen, but eight SEC teams in Omaha is a possibility, especially with the way.
No, it's not a possibility, because they would never let that happen in the NCAA.
No.
Regionals and super regionals, they match them up together, so you can only have 4.
Sometimes.
No, never have that. And that can never happen. It can never happen in baseball, because baseball is a regionalized regional. So you could not have all 8 teams that would host a super regional. And you're not going to have 8 teams that are not going to have played each other either in a regional or super regional, even from the SEC. It never happened. Never happened.
Okay.
It won't happen for any conference, because they'll end up matching ACC, like Florida and Florida State. They'll end up putting them against there. Now, I guess technically it's possible in the sense that if all 8 won their regions and they all were in different ones, but I don't think you get 8 that don't match up at some point crossing in that schedule. I know like in softball they don't do that. I mean,
what'd you have last year, 4?
You end up there. Yeah. 4 is about the max you're going to get in. You might get 4 teams in, but at some point the NCAA is going to route the conferences against each other so that they don't dominate like that. So they don't put 8 in there, either in the regional or the super regional.
So they won't in the regional. You're not going to get another SEC team in your regional. They will not send 2 to the same region.
Well, what if you had LSU? You had LSU hosting, and you have Texas A&M as the 4 seed.
You can't.
They can. They have. They've been there before where they played. So I mean, it's not going to happen all the time. But anyway, who do you think's going to be there? Who do you think's going to make it? You think it's possible that there'd be 8 SEC teams in Omaha?
Right now. Look at this.
Well, right now, yeah, everybody's got a shot right now.
You got Florida, Vandy, Texas A&M, and LSU as national
Stony Brook
seeds
has a chance to be
in the
back
top
right
8.
now.
No, I'm telling you, you have 4 SEC teams in the top 8. So right now they're hosting super regionals. Okay?
Yeah.
And then you have only South Carolina.
Right.
Only South Carolina hosting a regional, but then travel.
But then traveling for super regional. And what they would end up doing with that is they would, if it came down to 8 teams, let's say that there's some magic of the schedule, it ends up at the end of the year and 8 SEC teams are at the top, which won't happen because they have to play each other. So their schedule's going to knock each other out at some point, and they're not going to be the top 8 national
Well,
seeds.
last year you had, I want to say, Auburn went to LSU. There were 2 all SEC super regionals.
Right, and that's what they do. They end up making it so that, because it's a regional format, it's a true regional format where they try to send people not so far away. If they can bus and save money, they want to bus and save money. And they do the same thing in the regionals, even with, they say they're paired, but if you watch those pairings, those 16 seeds are not.
I'll tell you what'll be fun to watch. I think that one of your, using your logic, okay, one of which they hate playing each other, and I still don't know why. I think it's because the Longhorns are just sore losers because A&M left them without a date. But I would love to see those 2 play football. I'd love to see them play baseball every year. I'd love to see them play basketball. And Texas refuses to ever since A&M left. Oh, they're not in the conference. For some reason, I think Florida and FSU play in every single sport every single year.
Yep.
And
We
they've
play
never been the
tiddlywinks
same.
against one another.
Every year. So I won't accept that. But however, the NCAA will do that and pair them up. So I think one of your teams is going to be your Texas A&M super regional winner.
Well, that's assuming that Texas wins and not Rice, which Rice has usually lately been the better team out of those three.
Right. But they'll all be there. And I really think that this year last year Rice paired them up. They paired them up with Rice. This
Right.
year I think Texas and Texas A&M, if they both win regionals, they'll get a taste of each other. I think the winner of the Florida State
And Miami.
regional or
one
Miami,
of those three.
one of those two teams between Florida State, or excuse me, between Florida State and Miami, one of them will host a super region. The other one probably won't.
And the other one, if they win, will travel here.
And the
That's
one-
what they do every year. It's like we can't
Yep.
get 3 Florida teams out of Florida because they send UCF or USF or Stetson or whoever wins their league. They have to go travel to either Florida, Miami, or Florida State to play in a regional. And that's hard to get out of that home site.
Yep.
That's why you want to be one of the top 8 seeds, though, because the last time I checked, I don't have the stat, but like 4 years ago when I did the looking at it, 75% of the teams that make it to Omaha host a regional, and the number goes up for those hosting super regionals. You almost never find someone that loses the super regional at home.
And when we talk about the top 10 right now, FSU is in the top 10 right now. And I don't know much about their team this year, but they're always there. I mean, like you said, the Florida teams, Miami, Florida, and FSU are always there. What do you see them doing in the ACC versus Miami?
Well, I think it used to be that was the case. That was Miami and Florida State were going to be the two big teams that play out of
Exactly.
Florida. And then when Miami came in the ACC, that's what everybody thought would happen.
And
But
it
the
hasn't.
Did
problem,
that just go off?
the problem is North Carolina. I don't think so.
Okay.
The problem is North Carolina has now sort of moved to the top of the list, and now you've got North Carolina and Virginia.
Yeah.
That are maybe the two best teams in the ACC, have supplanted Florida State. And there's a
Miami.
lot of talk about people at Florida State who love Mike Martin, and there's some people who think it's time for
him to
Coach
go.
Martin to go.
Yep.
Because they want him to get to Omaha, they want him to win it, but there's a lot of talk about him going, and from people that I know who are Florida State fans, baseball fans, who've talked about, well, if he goes, then they're going to bring Mike Jr. in to be the skipper. But there are a lot of people who don't think that's a good idea. And so, you get to a point where you have to make a decision as a program of where you're going to go.
That cutting the umbilical cord with the 70, 80-year-old guy, it's worked pretty good for them. And you look at it in football, and I heard the same argument. And it takes a little while to make that transition, but Jimbo's done all right. And I think it's something where you have your allegiance and everything, and he's still putting the teams out.
Yeah.
They're still winning.
They're still always competitive.
They're all competitive, but then so was the football team. They were competitive.
That's true.
And that level that the Florida State fans expect to be at, that level of always making it to the College World Series and then losing.
It'll be interesting. Florida State fans, Miami fans, write in. Other teams from around the country, when you hear it, write in. Tell us about your team. We don't get to see a lot of the West Coast teams.
No.
We don't get to see the Oregons and Oregon States play. We've got the SEC network around here. You see the ESPN games that are on TV.
Yep.
And unfortunately, and that was the last thing we wanted to talk about was television. Is the SEC network is and I'm sure once basketball gets done, it's going to even pick up even more. Is going to be showing a lot of softball and baseball games around the SEC. However, the national games, it's just not there. And
Well, there's no big national matchups. We don't travel. Softball does. We could do another show about that, about the difference in baseball and softball in terms of national schedule. Like our softball team right now, as we're talking, are flying to the West Coast, and they'll play the big teams in the Pac-12, and they'll play them early. They don't skip anybody.
They played. I remember they played Michigan in the finals last year for the national championship,
And we just
they
got
had
done playing Michigan.
and they had already played them twice in the regular season, and
And-
this year they've already played them.
And we'll
once
play them
already.
again.
Yep.
And so, they play like that. But in baseball, you don't find those matchups. For whatever reason, you don't find an Oregon traveling cross coast
No.
to come play in Florida in this time of the year. Now, the northern teams might come down to play because they have to get games in. But you don't find that Florida goes to the West Coast and plays in a tournament. For whatever reason, they don't have those like they have in college softball, where they have the tournament in West Palm,
They're in San Diego, and they were just in Tampa.
well,
And,
San Diego, but gosh, the one where all the stars live in the desert, Palm Springs. Palm Springs.
but a lot of that is, as a baseball coach, as a softball coach,
You're taking
you can
20
as
players.
a softball right, but as a softball coach, you can bring as a softball tournament, you can bring in a dozen teams, and you can have over a 3-day period of time have a team play 6 of those teams because you can play 2 games a day. In baseball, the most you're ever going to do is bring in 4 teams and play 1, 1, and 1, and over a weekend play 3 different
Why?
teams.
Why couldn't you?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you go?
They really don't
why
like
couldn't you go-
double-headering baseball
But why
anymore.
couldn't you go to Peoria? Why couldn't you go to, as we talked about, to the places where the minor league teams play in Arizona, and in February, in the first weekend, have a 10-team tournament out there and play some of the best teams and play, those 4 games on those 4 fields per day. And you've got all those teams out there playing some, because you don't play every team when you go to the tournament in Palm Springs in softball. You don't play everybody that's there. You don't play a round robin where you play everybody. You may play 3 or 4 teams, but there may be 12 teams that are in the tournament.
And that's how they invite 2 from the same conference.
Sure,
because
they don't
those
play.
2 teams never play each other.
They don't play.
But you get the interesting thing, and I would think a coach would like this. Tim Walton, the Gator softball coach, he may not play Tennessee when they're in San Diego, but you know what?
He can watch.
He'll see
He can
Tennessee
watch,
play
exactly
3
right.
times, and when he gets them during the season, he'll have seen them play already, even though he wasn't the one that
Right,
played.
but why don't they do
Why
that in
don't
college baseball? Why don't you have a weekend if you're ESPN, if you're the Texas, the Big 12 network, or you're the Pac-12 network, you're the SEC network. Why don't we look at a package deal, ACC network, where you have that done? You play it at Disney, and you play out those complexes. Even in Florida, you play that in the first weekend, opening weekend. The major league teams have not reported there. Those facilities are sitting there available. Think about all the people that would come watch that. To watch even if you did the 8 teams that went to Omaha last year, and he brought those guys in to play 4 games over the weekend.
Besides this weekend's Florida-Miami matchup, what other top interconference matchups are there out there?
I don't think there are not any major ones because you don't travel to play those teams. Florida's one of those few teams that really plays somebody hard. I want to say hard, but probably not. I mean, it's the ones we know most about. But you think about it, Miami's not going to play another SEC team, I don't believe, on their schedule. FSU doesn't play. They're not going to travel and play LSU for a weekend series. But Florida goes and plays Miami. Florida plays a 3-game set spread out over 3 weeks against FSU midweek. There's not that many teams that play that. I mean, you get a lot of the Alabamas playing the Sanfords, and you get a lot of the Auburns playing the Huntington Colleges.
That's a tough matchup there for
Well,
Alabama.
it would be this year, but
They play twice. They play twice.
Most
home and home.
most years that's not so hard. I mean, you schedule. It's like us playing Stetson. It's a hard game because Stetson treats that a whole lot better than Florida does.
Well, and I've always said, and that's one thing about college baseball, and for you viewers out there that well, so and so, they lost to Florida Atlantic, or they lost to, and I'll tell you what. Those midweek games, and most recently I see South Carolina take it on the hump a couple times there before in midweek games. And Coastal Carolina is not...
They're good.
They're good.
They're good.
Western Carolina, they're good. And when they're playing South Carolina on a Tuesday night or on a Wednesday night, South Carolina is more concerned about having their rotation for Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the SEC than having their number one.
And Coastal Carolina is ranked 18th, and they start their number 1 Friday night starter.
Because that game means so much to them.
And then they'll play again. They'll start him on Sunday. So
And-
they will pitch him twice in a week, where Florida or South Carolina won't pitch their ace but once.
And so don't put too much into, and that's why baseball, I mean, I always say that the team that won the World Series last year lost about 65 times last year. And that's the thing with baseball is you lose. And it's the if you can win 2 out of every 3 games, especially against the type of schedule some of these teams play, especially with the fact that every team, regardless of when they're playing them, is throwing their number 1 guy trying to make a point of how good they are, because that kind of game can make it for those teams.
Oh, absolutely. That means you get in the tournament sometimes because maybe you don't win your league, but you get an at-large if you're on the bubble because you beat a Florida State, because you beat an Oklahoma State, because you beat an Oregon State even at the beginning of the year. That's on your resume.
Right.
That, hey, we beat Oregon State, and or we beat Rice. If you're Stephen F. Austin and you beat Rice, then you're in there. If you're Houston and you beat Texas or you beat Texas A&M, yeah, it looks good on your resume when it comes time to do I get in, do you not get in?
And the last thing, if there's any people, and I don't know who's listening, who's watching, whatever, but you brought
Probably
up a
your
great
mom,
point.
my mom, his mom.
My mom's not
Your
watching.
mom's not watching.
Mine isn't
Maybe-
either.
No,
My
your
mom's
mom's
not
not either. Maybe your friends.
My mom.
Maybe we can call a couple people.
But if there's anyone in Dallas, because here's what's
Yeah.
interesting. Dallas Baptist, national seed last year, super regional host and everything like that, all pitching. I mean, every one of their games, 1-0, 2-1, 2-0, just outstanding. Wes Johnson, one of the best pitching coaches in the country, and he pretty much put that program on the map. He's now the head pitching coach over at Mississippi State. What's the talk in Dallas Baptist? Are they ranked anymore? I don't think they are.
I don't believe they are. Let me
What
check.
pitching can do for a team,
Yeah.
and what a pitching coach, and that's the one thing about the consistency.
There are others considered. So
Are
I
they
guess
still-
technically they would be 27th.
Okay, but it's interesting with college baseball, and I think it's the one thing that you can really see is these teams pretty much build up programs and they're ranked. The same teams. LSU's there every single year.
Absolutely.
Florida's there every single year. FSU's there every single year. Mike Martin and everything.
Top
like that.
25.
The players change drastically, and even though sometimes the players are not as good, college baseball is all about coaching. And it's interesting when a coach moves and a program restarts. That's usually when the change occurs.
It does.
And
You can have a really great team that's at a small school, and the coach leaves, and that program goes downhill because guys love to play for certain guys, and they can get the best out of them. Sometimes they can get the best out of players that they put together the right roster. And in college baseball, you're right on the nose. If you can get 3 pitchers, you can win 2 out of 3 series.
Yep.
All you gotta do is
Two
get a
out of
couple of hits. If you can't score, you can't. If nobody scores against you, you can't lose. You just keep playing.
And I think, and a good transition and a good place to end on, and I think the younger the athlete, the younger the baseball player, the more that, if you're a very good little league coach, you don't lose. And I say
Right.
you don't
Yeah,
lose.
you don't lose.
You win every single game. Good high school coach builds programs, and he can have players there that aren't very good, but he's going to win. In college, you see it in college football even more so, and eventually in the major leagues, it's the talent. It's the talent and what you can put together. The manager kind of is there to put it together and everything. But next week we're going to talk about high school baseball, and we're going to talk about youth baseball and travel baseball and different things like that, and how much coaching plays a part in that. How much, I've always said it's very good to coach because if you give me the best athletes, but I think at youth programs, I think the coaching makes the better athletes oftentimes.
Certainly does improve. We'll talk about that next week. Hope to see you guys then. For now, go out and play ball.
That's it.